Shortland Street started. It was my first television writing gig. Even before it was on screen, they were looking for writers, and a friend suggested I try out for it, and I did. Yeah, it was a steep learning curve, but it was a lot of fun, and of course, it was the early days of the show too. So we didn't really know how long it was going to last, and I learned a lot. I learned a lot, that's for sure. And then it sort of, in that first year, once people got over the cultural cringe of having a soap nightly and all of that, when it took off, yeah, it was great. The Chosen again, that was a production that Gavin Strawn and I developed with Robin Scholes, and yeah, it was great. It was darker. Obviously we had the wonderful Cliff Curtis in the lead role. We thought we were making this very dark, gritty, exploring the underbelly of New Zealand thing, but I think in the end it kind of, it was compromised into something different for whichever channel, well, I think it was TV2 we did that for, so there's this, it's learning about how there has to be this compromise between what writers want and what the network wants, and that's tricky. It can be a tricky road to negotiate. It's still one of my favourites, and I think it still really stands the test of time. It was quite ahead of its time, I think, in some ways. I wish we'd made more series of it. The other fun thing, of course, about it was we got to explore what Eve's fantasy, she had a very rich fantasy life, and of course we got to create those fantasies. We had her on the Titanic and or doing Shakespeare. It was wonderful to play with that form. Even just the other day, someone told me their 11-year-old, got them watching it, and they loved it. And I think it's because it had those perennial, truthful teen issues at its heart. Yeah, it still really does stand up. Yeah, one of my faves, definitely. I only worked on a couple of series I think I credited myself in the end as script auntie, I was a script editor really. I just had input for a while there. I mean, that's very much that was the Naked Samoans show. I just tried to occasionally wrangle them. and but that was genius, that show. And yeah, it was just about helping them shape the stories and scripts. Yeah. And it was a lot of fun. That was Rachel Lang and James Griffin's baby, but I loved working on that in the early days. Such great characters. I mean, I don't think any of us, again, could have known how big that show was going to be, but right from the start it had an energy and a reverence that I was really drawn to, I think it was a really hard show to write, actually, and to get that right combination of drama and comedy, and as it went along I think it got harder because it became its own particular kind of beast. I think that's probably what Rachel and James would say too. I mean, in the end I think the show's creators, as often is the case, were the strongest writers on the show as well. Yeah, so it was its own particular beast, and it could be a tricky beast to manage, but it was so much fun. Prime wanted a series that obviously there was not a big budget involved, and this concept, which is not, I don't think it wasn't my concept, although I got to work on it as a head writer, showrunner, where we basically got, yeah, it was all to be basically shot in the interrogation rooms, and I just got different writers involved to come up with a story of their own that could work within those very narrow parameters, and and was doing the same myself, and it was interesting because, yeah, I think it did really well. I mean, it worked, as a concept, and people came up with very interesting ideas. Yeah, some worked better than others, of course, but it was a good concept that I wouldn't mind revisiting again at some point. Bearing Brian's another one that I wish we'd got to make more of, but fate and the network had other ideas, I suppose, because I thought that was a great premise, and it came from a night out with friends. It was someone's hen's party, and towards the end of the evening, Various women admitted that they had fantasised about life without their husbands. I went home and thought, wouldn't it be funny, not funny, but interesting rather, if one of the friends went ahead and did that, disposed of their husband in one way or another. What I loved about it was that it was, at its heart, there was a truth about friendships under pressure and, you know, yes, with an extreme event involved, which is that they disposed of one of their friends' husband's body. But that's really what it was about. So it was really about exploring the truth of women's friendships. James Griffin, in this case, came to me with this basic concept he had, but I knew immediately I could see the audience for it, and then I thought it was a good idea. It was clearly a sea change story, kind of story. I liked the idea that it was a mixture. It was Australians coming to New Zealanders, you know, to New Zealand rather, and yeah, I could see that it had legs. But neither of us, I think, expected it to go as well as it did in Australia. Certainly, it just really took off that first series. It obviously spoke to something, but we were very pleasantly surprised, and we weren't sure how they would take to the Australians, that is, to having so many New Zealanders, you know, talking on their screens, and I think, you know, Channel 7, to be honest, took quite a risk with that. But of course they had, you know, Eric at the helm in the lead role, who's a known, you know, a very known star over there. So that helped. Even so, yeah, it was great to see it took off. It's a very gentle show. I mean, you know, but again, at its core, a very real premise about a family, you know, in grief. It's one of those ones that I really touch people. Like, I read some very heart-wrenching emails from people who watched it, who'd clearly been through, you know, they had stories of loss, and it really resonated with them, and I think they found it comforting, and that was a nice thing to experience as well, that, yeah, people related to it and were comforted by it. When the last producer, Simon Bennett, was leaving, they asked me to be producer, which I was surprised by, but and my natural instinct was to say no. That would be really hard work, and I don't want to be in charge, you know. But I thought about it, and I thought, well, if ever there was a time that I you know, I'd become re-engaged with the characters and the stories to a certain extent, that ever there was a time to do it, it was probably now that I'm almost grown up and responsible enough to be in charge, you know, and that it would be a challenge to, you know, to do it. It's in a really good place, actually, Shortland Street at the moment. Like, you know, where other soaps are not doing so well, it's quite amazing that it's rating still as well as it is. And yeah, long may it last, or at least as long as I'm in the role, anyway.